The blonde commander froze in disbelief. How could fire arise without a spoken spell? On the ground below, Oda Jinaku looked at the simple oil lighter in his hand, a sharp contrast to the magical world around, and suddenly realized. This mundane object from his world had just saved his life. When death passed by, the usual, almost fairy tale vision of a perfect life appeared in the mind. To get married, have children, and live long and happily. In another town, dressed in work clothes, Oda quietly reflects on this thought. He does not deny that having a wife and children is a form of happiness, and acknowledges that this is the story often heard in the countryside. Having blown the pipes to the end, he was still thinking and came to the conclusion. Living free and alone is also a kind of happiness. When the water flows freely again, the work is done. The young man confirms that the repair is complete, addressing him by his full name, Oda Jinaku. The narrative presents him as a 38-year-old man working in the city as a repairman, or more precisely, a handyman. A flash of memory provides the context of the case. That morning, Oda received a call from an elderly couple. Their water was not running. It turned out they had simply closed the shutoff valve, and at their request, he also replaced the valve and filter. The man sincerely thanked him, calling him a reliable craftsman, but Oda just smiled and explained that he was actually an electrician. Turning to the present, the young client begins to play matchmaker and asks Oda if he is ever going to get married after all. He is almost 40. Oda looks tired, brushes off the familiar question, and says that nowadays it is hard enough just to survive. He returns with the score in his hands and voices the shocking reason why he is still single. His father on his deathbed asked him never to marry. The young man was stunned, calling it nonsense and insisting that true happiness is marriage and children. Oda indifferently gets on her scooter, thanks the man for the job and prepares to leave, while the client calls him from behind. After the last job of the day, Oda returns home, sits on the porch in casual clothes, opens a can of drink, and settles in for a quiet, peaceful evening alone. He takes a long, pleasurable sip from the can and, smiling broadly with joy, exclaims that being a bachelor is the best thing in the world. This freedom allows him to spend money and time as he pleases. Sitting on the porch, he thinks no one scolds him for his clothes or hobby camping, fishing, and bike rides. Keep him busy. He earns enough to be away from home for weeks without problems, as evidenced by the photo of a big fish on his phone. His thoughts turn to a darker topic. The anniversary of his father's death is soon, and he remembers how hard his life was because his mother constantly spent money and quickly squandered everything his father earned. The memories continue, showing a time when his father, in front of a much younger Oda, tried to expand his business by taking a loan from the bank for new equipment. The venture was doomed from the start. His father clutched a savings book, and his face was a mask of shock and despair. He collapses to the floor in complete despair when it becomes clear that his wife Oda's mother took the borrowed money and disappeared. Although the betrayal crushed his father, they still were not completely without hope. The grandfather intervened and saved them. The old man gave the last money of his life to pay off the debt. He and Oda's grandmother then moved in with the grandfather, and the grandfather worked construction jobs to support the family. He remembers how, even in childhood, the grandfather explained. The family business was originally an electrical company, but he transformed it into a handyman workshop. When he was a boy, he watched his father and grandfather work together. Now this memory surfaces when he sees his own reflection. He recalled how, looking at his father and grandfather in the old family business Ode Electric Works, he first wanted to follow in their footsteps. The memories took him to that quiet corner in the village where they so often escaped. 2. After the family crisis, living with the grandfather helped the father recover. The three of them, grandfather, father, and son, fished and camped every weekend, gradually restoring the family bond, and young Oda proudly lifted his catch of fish. His father always adored motorcycles, and the same passion was shared by the grandfather since youth. Eventually, they bought a bike and spent hours in the garage working on it together while young Oda watched and learned. Soon, tinkering with repairs turned into trips. Three of them together rolled along endless roads. They traveled together until the sun dipped below the horizon, and he remembered those days as the best in his entire life. It was during those trips, when the wind whistled past his face, that a deep love for free, unrestrained life truly awakened in him. He recalled a conversation with his father, who called him Jinaku and insisted, "Do not believe the widespread notion that marriage automatically brings happiness for the father, only his own happiness mattered." Oda became confused. Does this mean that social expectations, marriage, and children, so there would be grandchildren, are worthless? The father calmly explained that it was not about completely rejecting these things, but about the freedom to live by one's own rules. Lying on his porch these days, Oda casually returned in thought to that moment. His father's words, who suffered so much because of his own marriage, imprinted on his life philosophy. He valued women, but the idea of a happy married life did not attract him at all. He much preferred to spend time on his own terms, riding a motorcycle, hiking, fishing, or simply reading manga or light novels. Lying down, he thought about plans for the end of the month. Maybe he would go on a trip for 2 or 3 nights and stay in some popular place. Spring came, his decision was firm. He had already decided to remain a bachelor, earn money himself, spend it as he pleased, and live life exactly as he wanted it. This philosophy extended to work as well. When he arrived at the job, a young client apologized that the house shutter had broken so suddenly, but Oda simply replied that it was not a problem, he was just glad to have. Inside, quickly surveying, Oda assured the client that he would fix everything with the spare parts he brought. Then he warned that during the electrical installation, there would be no electricity for some time. The client agreed, and Oda prepared to turn off the bridge breaker. As he started, a scrap of paper quietly lifted and swirled toward floor, immersed in the wiring work. His thoughts drifted again to the trip. He reasoned that as soon as this work was done, he would start preparing, maybe find a few picturesque places to visit. Suddenly, without any warning, a powerful electric current surged through him. He screamed as the client turned on the alarm. Horror gripped Oda. He switched off the circuit breaker, but someone had to. Turned it on again. The shock threw him to the ground. He could hardly believe it, struck by current in the middle of work. The absurdity of it all was his last coherent. When his world darkened and vanished into darkness, one last truth settled in his mind. He died and rushed into the void, but consciousness suddenly flickers back. His eyes twitch, then slowly open. A drop of sweat runs down his temple and confusion clouds his feet. Features, he sharply sat up with a hoarse groan. The only thought, I am alive, echoed in his head. He looks at his hands, clenches and unclenches his fists. Despite what seemed like a deadly shock, the body feels completely intact, and that scares him even more than th. Calming down and standing up, he looked around. It was no longer a factory, but a cobblestone street and buildings from a past era. Such a sharp contrast with the last memory made him wonder if he really died. Eventually, this sharp alienation only deepens. He remembers the warehouse district, but everything here is foreign. A wild, almost ridiculous thought creeps into his head. Did he die and transfer to another world, like in those light novels he read? He brushed it off as if in a dream. His eyes stop on a sign, Alexandrite Trading Company. The name is strange, but the real shock is caused by the font. The letters are some strange squiggles, neither Japanese nor English, yet he reads them effortlessly. This impossibility overwhelms him with a wave of panic. Through him, while his head was spinning, suddenly a sharp command sounded, don't move. Oda froze, his body tense from surprise. In order, turning to the sound, he found himself in front of a line of soldiers in chainmail with swords. Their leader, weapon of the ready, pointed at him and demanded that he identify himself. He himself. He looks at the armed figures, thoughts tearing in his head. The armor and swords look too real to be cosplay. They seem like knights from the Middle Ages. It remains to guess who these There are people. The picture finally comes together. A strange little town, a foreign but understandable language, medieval knights. He understands how this could have happened, but now one thing is clear as day: this is not Japan, and the absurd theory from a few minutes ago turns into a terrible reality. He really was in another world. His inner revelation is cut off when the senior guard shouts again, accusing him of illegal entry and calling him suspicious. The irritated guard demands an answer, and Oda snaps that he is no more aware of what is happening then. That's right, he acts on pure instinct. When the guard lunged, Oda jumped aside, grabbed his arm, and with a sharp kick hit him in the stomach, the Aikido technique his grandfather taught him. The guard howled and flew back, and Oda instantly realized his mistake. The timing was bad. Ready to fight, his defensive move irritated the other guards, who shouted orders and rushed to surround him. With his back pressed to the wall and a lighter in his hand, Oda grits his teeth, knowing the moment has come. Realizing there is no chance, he instantly raises his hands and surrenders, sweating profusely. He begs them to listen and swears he is not dangerous, as he just regained consciousness here, and a calm female voice cuts through the tension by simply saying, "All right." The guard brings out an impressive woman with light hair and a fur boa, next to her a man in a top hat. He advises the lady not to come closer, but she waves off his concerns, considering the situation. To be fine, she approaches Oda, her gaze sharp, carefully examining the strange clothes, black hair, and black eyes. Behind her, the advisor says that Oda is clearly not from these parts, and Oda tense can only agree and admit that he probably not. The woman asks him to name himself, and he introduces himself as Oda Geniku. She replies that she is Sandrone, president of the trading company Alexandrite. Oda asks to be called simply Geniku. Sandrone finds the name strange, but Oda thinks it's cool and insists, asking if she will listen to him. Sandrone smiles slyly in response, agrees to listen, but on one condition. If the story is interesting, she will listen, but if it is boring, he will have to listen. To end up in prison. The threat hangs in the air, and Oda imagines himself in shackles in a dark cell, crushed by his terrible failure to get into a random world only to immediately face danger. Oda imagines himself in shackles in a dark cell, limited by his terrible failure thrown. A prison term. Breaking away from gloomy thoughts, he turns and sees a slight smirk on Sandrone's face. She admits that she is actually very interested. He is clearly panicked, and Oda begs her not to carry out her plan. Her curiosity flares up because of one detail. She notes to her advisor that Oda somehow slipped past their magic guards and infiltrated the warehouse, but was still caught by an ordinary watchman. Outside stand the guards, and she leans forward with a sly smile, thinking that the appearance of such a suspicious man as he is actually. Quite amusing, he stands frozen while the reality of his situation dawns on him. The mention of the guard mages confirms his suspicion. This is, without a doubt, F. Fantasy world. His thoughts were cut off when he noticed Sandrone's advisor trying to kindle a flame with flint and steel, and she looks at him as if asking why he uses such a primitive method. She wonders aloud why he doesn't just use magic. Seeing their struggle, Oda, sweating under the watchful eye, assures that he doesn't want to harm and offers his fire, pulling out a small metal object. With a clear click, he ignites the device. A steady flame instantly appears, causing the Sandrone, her advisor, and the nearest guards to hold their breath. In silence, the flame burns brightly, a wonder for the spectators. Sandrone exclaims that this is impossible because there was neither a spell nor a magic circle. Her advisor, no less shocked, asks if this is some kind of magical tool that creates fire. Before Oda could answer, Sandrone impulsively lunged forward and snatched the object from his hands, and her advisor shouted her name anxiously as she stumbled and bumped into Oda. In her haste, she quickly recovers, her eyes sparkling with childlike wonder as she examines the lighter. "What is this?" she asks, completely fascinated by this little gadget. Constant flame. When they decide to move on, Oda explains that this device is a lighter, and mentally smiles at the classic trick of a modern gadget from his world that impresses the local F. Fantasy first. He asks if this means he is being taken to jail, but Sandrone only smiles and assures him that VIP service awaits. When he complains about the lighter, she orders her advisor Richter to escort the new guest and drives everyone else away. He remains standing on the cobblestones, noting in his thoughts how he suddenly transformed from a suspicious man into an honored guest. Richter, Sandrone's advisor, discreetly waved his hand for him to follow. Later, Oda walked alone down a dark, unfamiliar street under a starry sky, over which a shooting star flashed. He realized that his lighter really saved him, but in this new world he had no idea what awaited ahead. A new life was beginning, but anxiety was much stronger than any excitement about the unknown path. Under the starry sky in a well-furnished office, the blonde Commander Sandrone settled on a soft sofa and gestured to invite the guest. Her guest Oda Jinaku raises his gaze. A drop of sweat glistens on his temple. It is clear that he is worried. He calls her, pressing the bag with tools to his chest. He feels uneasy. She holds his metal lighter and examines it closely. She demands that he explain what it is, and he only asks to return his precious oil lighter. He insists again. It is just a lighter, a tool for fire. Sandro replies that there are no magical devices for creating fire, and most importantly, no mana is felt from the object, so confused she asks how it can even ignite if it is not a magical tool. When he was questioned about Akibia, fire shop, left Oda completely bewildered. He could only admit that he had no idea, apologizing weakly. Seeing a dead end, she changes tactics, deciding to listen to him first and demands that he honestly say why he is here. Oda, still clutching the bag, insists that everyone knows he is not lying. Then he explains everything. He recalls working in another world, being struck by electricity and losing consciousness, and waking up lying in front of a warehouse. His incredible story was met with an unexpected decision. Sandrone, now with advisor Richter nearby, announced that for now they would act as if he really came from another world. A sly smile flashed on her face. She raised the lighter. This arrangement suited her, and it was time to talk about what would happen next. Her words and behavior fill Oda with horror. He turns away from her and whispers to Richter that he has a very bad feeling. His fear is immediately confirmed. Richter, drenched in sweat, turns to Oda with a tense face and decisively confirms that his bad feeling is, of course, absolutely correct. His advisor Richter nervously talks about the proposal, tells Oda that he is interesting to him, and more importantly that he smells like money, and falls silent, hinting that Oda has nowhere to go. Sandrone openly and without hesitation made her proposal. She demanded that Oda become hers. He instantly refused. Although flattered, he swore to live alone and free. She immediately refuted his assumption. She does not need him personally, but his knowledge, because he is the only one here who understands things from his world, and she intends to use this to her advantage. Confused but understanding the conditions, Oda reluctantly agrees. Sandrone praises his choice and promises in exchange for that information to provide food, shelter, and knowledge about this world. Her attention instantly focuses on his lighter, taking it in her hand. She marvels excitedly at how easily fire can be created, and asks him how it works. Before Oda can respond, she turns to her advisor, recalling his earlier mention of Akibia, a place where people live by fire, and orders Richter to explain. He obediently agrees. But Sandrone quickly loses interest. She succinctly and officially introduces Richter as her secretary, bodyguard, and president of the company Alexandrite Trading. Suddenly says she's going to bed and leaves, and Oda, stunned, sadly realizes she is still holding his lighter. Left alone, the two men sit facing each other. Richter notes Oda's difficult situation, but Oda brushes it off, and Richter, returning to business, announces that their conversation is now beginning. He begins to talk about the local fire economy. Akibia shops where magically summoned fire is sold. In this world, fire is mostly obtained only by magic or with great difficulty using flint, so every household regularly buys fire to light lamps, and this finally convinces Oda that he really has ended up in another world. Oda says that at home fire never troubled him, and Richter suddenly realizes, if they could mass-produce and sell a device like this lighter, they would secure themselves for life. The conversation shifts when Oda asks about age. Richter says 29, and Lady Sandrone only 21, and Oda is impressed by her ambition at such a young age. He confirms that he understands how the fire economy works in this world, but instantly changes course and asks Richter to explain what kind of country this is. The advisor, leaning over a large map, looks as if he is about to start a lesson. Richter explains that they are currently in the warehouse district of the 13th Ward. All trading companies store their goods here, and this district belongs to the Kingdom of Edelstein, which he calls the largest country on the continent. Hearing this, Oda falls silent and asks if this world has the same fantastic things magic used to fight monsters. Richter confirms that magic is quite real and says that Oda's sudden appearance bypassed 2 layers of magical detection fields, which stunned them, adding that the company Alexanderite even uses its own magical arts. Oda smiles and says it really sounds like a fantasy world, and Richter firmly confirms there are monsters here and various types of magic from offensive to defensive. A sly smile appears on Oda's face. He considers options and boldly asks Richter if this is his chance to shine, using modern knowledge to gain power in this new world, and Richter remains serious and says that first the most important thing must be decided. First, taking the advice to heart, Oda immediately asks the question any hardworking man would. Are there taxes or income reports here? Richter grimaces embarrassedly at the very word income reports, and Oda, not believing his luck, learns that taxes are taken only once a year and only 10 of the calculated income. Stunned by the discovery, he immediately declares this place a paradise. Price, his head is spinning from the thought of that financial freedom that this new world seemingly offers. He thinks to himself that here he could really. While Richter meanwhile looks puzzled by Oda's obsessive attention to money, recalling that even in Japan, being alone, he had enough money to afford himself. Spend, he begins to dream of an ideal, slow life, maybe even becoming independent, but Richter instantly brings him back to reality, saying it will be difficult and reminding Oda that he still doesn't know much. And most importantly, Lady Sandrone will not let him go so easily, because she intends to use his knowledge for her own interests. Benefit, when Richter's words reach her, Sandrone's own intentions respond. She is motivated and already thinking about where to start, and Richter correctly guesses. Her first interest concerns Oda's oil life. A new sense of purpose hardens his determination, and with a determined smile Oda agrees to move forward. He thinks that reproducing the oil lighter might be too ambitious, but matches are a quite realistic start, so he asks Richter to teach him about the different types of flint used to ignite fire in his world. Just as Oda is ready to start the lesson, Richter raises his hand, noticing the late hour, and suggests continuing the conversation tomorrow and preparing a room for Oda. When he was escorted to the room for the night, Oda pondered how unexpectedly everything had happened. He admitted to himself that at first he did not know what to expect, but this new life is not so bad, although living alone is hard. A slow, calm routine here could quite suit him. Yet that same night, wrapped in a blanket, he remembered his vow to remain alone and, blushing from embarrassment due to some unnamed attention, realized that this feeling contradicted his decision. And rustling the blanket over his head, a new, very awkward chapter of his life began. The next morning, a knock woke Oda. Janaku, a man in a top hat, entered the room. Richter smiled, greeted him good morning, and asked if he had slept well. He mentally notes that the bed was fine, but the mattress was uncomfortably hard. Richter calls him to breakfast and says that the lady is waiting, to which Oda agrees to join. Walking down the impeccably clean corridor, Oda jokes that it is too sterile here for a warehouse. Richter explains that the building is their office. Guest rooms are arranged for visitor clients, and behind is a separate residence for the lady, and Oda can only admire how luxurious everything is here. They enter a luxurious room where the blonde Commander Sandrone is sprawled on an exquisite sofa. She casually throws him a greeting, and he responds with good morning. He immediately asked to have his lighter returned, but she waved it off and said they would have breakfast first, and then she would give him work. Suddenly his attention is drawn to a bag nearby. He rushes to it, checks if it is intact, and with relief sees his tools inside, after which Sandrone officially entrusts him with creating a simplified, suitable for mass production version of this item. System, she hands him a lighter. When he confirms the task, he instantly counts the contents of the bag: clothes, wallet, phone, and other things, everything in place. He looks at the phone and notices the absence of signal, when suddenly Sandrone leans in close and, staring intently at the illuminated screen, startles him, and she exclaims how handsome he is. He explained that it was a smartphone from his world, now almost useless. Enchanted, she asked to have it, but he sharply refused, calling it his lifeline. Tension hung in the air until the maid ran in and announced that breakfast was served, which clearly tested Sandrone's patience. Standing before the food spread out on the table and left without a phone, Sandrone grumpily agreed to eat. Oda, noticeably relieved by this break, also agreed. He sighed contentedly after the meal, confirming to Richter that the food was wonderful and strangely familiar, and Richter, standing nearby, smiled he liked it too. On the other side of the long table, Sandrone broke the silence. With a graceful movement, she brought a cigarette to her lips and announced that it was time to smoke. Following her, he took out one of his and Sandrone asked if he had anything to light it. He clicked the lighter, confirmed, and explained that it was just a cheap tobacco thing from his world. Her curiosity flared. She noticed that tobacco also existed in his world, and then admitted that although the main business of their company was the development and sale of magical instruments, they also produced tobacco. She proposed an exchange, handing him a cigarette of her brand Stardust to try his. He agreed. Taking a drag of her cigarette, he found the taste unexpectedly sweet and honestly admitted that it made him feel quite good. Her experience, however, was quite different. After one puff, Sandrone burst into uncontrollable coughing. Oda asked if she was okay, but she recoiled, called his cigarette disgusting and nasty, and forbade him from smoking theirs, saying that from now on he would only smoke theirs. Embarrassed, he asked again what she was talking about, reminding her that tobacco was supposed to be harmful. Sandrone composed herself again and explained that her blend was different, favored among noble ladies, with healing properties that spread through the body and cleanse it from within. She scolded him not to put real products next to cheap junk, insisting that tobacco was a herb and of course good for you. Oda, resigned, thought that if he was going to keep smoking in this fantasy world, he would have to change brands. When that was decided, Sandro moved on. She announced that she had a business meeting with Richter, and meanwhile Odie was entrusted with creating a magical instrument that anyone could use to light a fire, and gave him full access to the workshop under the warehouse. Stunned by such a sudden task, he exclaimed, "Wait." He burst out in protest. She can't just blame it on him when he knows nothing about this world, at least give some instructions. But Sandrone briefly ordered Richter to call that girl. Although she would be absent for a few days, she assured it was not a problem. And Richter explained to Oda that he would be given an assistant who would back him up in everything he didn't understand. He glanced around the room. It looked more like a development laboratory than a simple workshop. Noticing unfamiliar tools and drawings, he nodded upon hearing a voice off-screen confirming that his assistant was one of the company's engineers. His inspection was interrupted by a loud scream. A young woman with glasses on her head flew into the room demanding to know what he had done to impress her lady. Otis stood confused, while she angrily grumbled that someone else had received Sandrone's praise, an achievement she believed belonged only to her. She stood alone, confidently posed, and introduced herself Yelena, a developer of magical devices from the Alexandrite company, then asked his name. Oda replied that he was Oda Jinaku, but just Jinaku was fine, and Yelena immediately remarked on how strange his name was and doubted whether he was mature enough and could handle the support test. Before he could answer, she proudly puffed out her chest and declared herself the best magic engineer her lady had ever recognized. Her boasting immediately left Oda confused. He couldn't grasp what a magic engineer was. And Yelena, without waiting for explanations, stated that she was 18 and gifted with 3 attributes, warning him not to underestimate her because of her youth, and the very concept of 3 attributes only further puzzled Oda. Fusion, she leaned closer, took a patronizing melodious tone, and sweetly said that a little baby needed help, and the older sister would teach him everything, which clearly embarrassed Oda. Her condescending tone made him see clearly. He recalled Sandro's instruction to treat him like an inexperienced boy and finally understood why Richter had hesitated earlier. A wave of irritation washed over him. Damn you, Sandro. He sighed bitterly, realizing he knew almost nothing about this world. Smiling confidently, he told Yelena that he was counting on her. She gave a thumbs up and said, "Leave it to me." After a minute of thought, Oda Jinaku, with a drop of sweat on his forehead, finally uttered the question that had been tormenting him. With hesitation in his voice, he asked what exactly is a magical instrument. His question threw Yelena off balance. She said he really knew nothing but immediately apologized for her sharpness and explained that without understanding this world, he wouldn't be able to work effectively, so she asked him to ask anything. And Oda, sitting on the floor, simply replied that he was counting on her. Yelena began the lesson with the simplest mana. She said it was the very fantasy energy he had imagined and explained that everyone in this world is born with some amount of it. She explained that mana manifests in different colors depending on a person's elemental affiliation: earth, water, fire, wind, light, and darkness, 6 in total. But she emphasized that elemental bearers are rare because most people have only colorless, non-elemental mana, and Oda recalled how he spent the whole morning bombarding her with such questions. Yelena continues, although elementals are almost never encountered, schools still teach the basics of magic, so even ordinary people can master and use small, useful household spells. And to Oda, all this seems as if ripped from a fantasy world. She adds that those born with a connection to the elements are on a completely different level. They can become powerful mages or skilled engineers of magical devices. And those who possess 3 elements at once can even take a place at the royal court. Oda admits that this is truly impressive. and Yelena, taking advantage of the moment, proudly declares that she herself possesses three elements: water, earth, and wind, and asks him if he thinks that's cool. He asks if her triple affinity means she can cast any spell. Yelena gently says that her skills are rather suited for simple daily charms and craftwork. She is not a combat sorceress, and does not know how to use offensive magic. Oda laughed, joking about the power of the commanding Lady Sandro, and Yelena instantly flared up. "Don't you dare speak like that about my lady. I went into trade because I was inspired by Lady Sandro's brilliance." Changing the subject, she called him Jinaku, and announced that she would test his magical affinity by asking for his hand. She extends a small sheet of paper, and with shining eyes says that it is a letter for determining magical affinity from the company Alexandrite, explaining that previously only majors of the magical association could do this, but now one drop of blood shows both the element and the total amount of mana. Oda, impressed, wonders if this didn't bankrupt the association, and Yelena proudly proclaims that this is one of Lady Sandro's greatest inventions. He listened as Yelena continued the story, recalling how the higher ranks of the magical association fiercely hated her lady's invention, bursting in and shouting at her. But she explained everything with a confident smile, and Sandrine was not shaken at all. She simply crushed them. To prove whose method was more accurate, Sandrine took her diagnostic sheets straight to the royal palace and openly challenged the mages of the association. Oda was simply struck by this wild audacity. Yelena decided that the magical association had to surrender, and since then Sandrine's sheets became indispensable. When the story ended, Yelena announced that it was time for his test. He hesitated and admitted that he did not like blood, but she reassured him it's just a tiny needle and will hardly hurt. He pressed his finger and winced as the strip pierced the skin. Again, when the results appeared, Yelena froze in shock. She exclaimed that his mana level was insane and that he had all 6 attributes at once. Oda, not understanding the full weight, joked that he must be super talented, but she quickly replied this is no time for jokes. Her attention instantly sharpened on a detail that others might have missed. The sheet had not 6, but 7 lines, and Oda looked down puzzled. He had just been told that there are only 6 attributes in the world. On the sheet were 6 familiar attributes, colored yellow, blue, red, green, white, and black, but as Yelena noticed, the 7th line shone with a special violet light, and she asked in surprise what the violet attribute could mean. Confused by such an unusual result, she turned to him with a serious expression, called him by name Jinaku, asked him to give his hand, saying she needed to check it more carefully, and he simply agreed. She took his hand and asked him to raise it and close his eyes, explaining that she was going to channel her mana directly into him to conduct a more detailed examination. He obeyed and closed his eyes. When her energy flowed into him, a pleasant warmth spread from her touch, and he quietly whispered that he felt warm. He feels Yelena's mana flowing into him, and she quietly prompts, "Move slowly and imagine that your mana is turning violet." In response, a dazzling violet discharge burst from his hand in the form of an arc, crackling in the air between them. He froze, recognizing the phenomenon, and Yelena recoiled in shock. He mutters confusedly aloud, asking himself if this happened because in his world he was struck by electricity. And Yelena, with eyes wide open in disbelief, confirms the incredible. He can transform his mana directly into lightning. She explains how deeply significant this is. He does not just possess all known properties, he has awakened a completely new property. Oda finds it strange to call his cause of death cool, but admits there is something new in it. Her face became serious and she warned him, if anyone finds out, all countries and guilds will come after him. Oda simply raised his hand and waved it off, completely dismissing the thought. He decisively refuses, stating that he is not interested in that and that it is simply not for him. He smiles slyly and says he has other matters he wants to attend to. Yelena, completely stunned, asks if he will really refuse what would surely be a huge promotion. She calls him a funny old man, feels embarrassed because she used to boast about her 3 traits, but still admits a promotion is good because it allows doing more. When everything was settled, they agreed to get to work. Alina noticed his sudden enthusiasm, and Oda explained that while most desperately long to go home, he even likes this world if he can already use magic, why not learn it? He looks at her with new determination and asks not just to help him with work, but to teach him magic, saying that the first project is a device for igniting fire. But to realize other ideas, he needs to understand magic well. He looks at the young magic engineer with sincere hope, formally placing his trust in her. He tells her that he counts on her, addressing her respectfully as since. The name clearly pleases her. A wide, joyful smile blooms on Alina's face. She repeats to herself sensei, because the word sounds nice, and agrees to teach without hesitation. To seal their new pact, she extends her gloved hand to him. When their palms firmly clasp, Alina promises to teach him everything she knows. Their partnership begins in the workshop. Oda Kanem is forging a new path as a jack-of-all-trades, creating magical tools. He realizes that life here is actually not different at all. Finally, it seems to him that his grandfather would definitely have loved this idea. Alina, full of excitement, exclaims that it sounds fun and it must be done. A new chapter begins for the ultimate duo. With a determined sparkle in his eyes and a fist raised high, Oda Heneku announces his new mission to create an invention that will change the world. A device that can ignite fire. Alina, his new mentor, gladly agreed, and Oda, seizing the chance, immediately asked his first question to the sensei. He asks why they don't just summon fire with magic. She has the fire element. And at his words, Alina's face becomes serious. She says it's not that simple. She explains how magic works in their world. Those who have the fire attribute are considered the strongest among mages and extremely rare, while most people without attributes can only lift small objects into the air. Oda froze in amazement. He thought that in a fantasy world the ability to control fire would be common. But now he understands that attribute bearers are truly special, and fire mages are a completely different league. Stone, Oda thoughtfully considers this. The idea of a magical stone seems straight out of fantasy to him, and Alina confirms this, adding that simple commands can be transmitted into such stones. She continues to explain why they are mined. Magical stones are crystals extracted from inside magical beasts. Adventurers hunt these creatures, sell the stones to the trading guild, and from their companies like hers buy them. Raising a decorated teapot, she reveals these stones' their true purpose is to power magical devices. Confirming Oda's guess, Yelena explains that inside the teapot is a processed magical stone. She pours her mana into it, and to Oda's surprise, the water instantly begins to boil. Oda finally understood. Yelena explained that the magical device engineer not only invents the tool itself but also inscribes commands on the stones, and for the teapot she wrote the command generate heat, so that's how it heats. Suddenly it dawns on him. There are masters who inscribe commands into these powerful stones, and this, as it seems to him, is simply fascinating. He looks at the simple steam teapot. A smile slowly blooms on his face. He declares his intention. He wants to craft devices that operate on these magical stones. Stones? Yelena continues the lesson and explains that stones come in different purities. The purer, the more expensive and the more complex commands can be written on them, while a simple low-purity stone, say goblin-made, barely handles a simple command to heat the teapot and quickly cracks. She clarifies this even more. Here everything is a coordinated economic cycle. Adventurers exterminate monsters for the stones, traders buy them and then sell magical devices powered precisely by these stones. Oda nods. He understands the stones are consumed, and without adventurers as suppliers there would be nothing. Years, so he asks Yelena to show him the stone from the teapot. After all, it is the one that gives off heat, and she gladly agrees. She places a small spherical stone in his open palm. When Oda looks at it, his eyes widen in surprise. A clear, familiar symbol is carved on the surface. Staring at the inscription, he asks Yelena if she can read it, and if it means heat, saying it looks exactly like kanji, and Yelena smiles and replies that it is a simple magical symbol she carved herself, and that stones with such symbols produce the effect corresponding to the inscription. To demonstrate, she points to a document titled Magical Aptitude Test Form, and notes that this copy was written by a senior whom she calls Sama. Oda freezes seeing the same kanji on the sheet, while Yelena proudly boasts that she herself knows only 3 symbols, and her one Sama 8, which makes Oda nervously ask if creating arcane signs is really that simple, while Yelena dreams about his eyes. Idle, his question ignited her rage. Yelena grabbed him and shouted that creating even one properly functioning character can take a lifetime development, symbol selection, and endless tests, and that he should save such talks for his dreams. Frightened by her outburst, Oda quickly apologized. She calms down and Oda looks at the stone in his hand. A smile spreads across his face as he realizes. The essence of magical engineering arcane script is just kanji he already knows, so he is insanely lucky. Break, he quietly rejoices to himself, a self-satisfied blush on his face because he understands. This new knowledge can give him more than any special trait or mana enhancement. Below, unaware of his discovery, Yelena offers to teach him magical writing later and assures him it's fun. Good, he confidently brushed off her offer, saying he can handle the scripting part himself. His smug smile irritated Yelena, who warned him, don't dare underestimate that mysterious figure. His head is a bustle of ideas. If simply carving kanji produces the desired effect, he could make tool prototypes as if playing, maybe even outpace production from his old world. He already imagines that next he will make an air conditioner, and a broad smile spreads across his face at the thought of what fun that will be. To be, he brings his attention to the here and now, gathers his thoughts, and decides on a simple first step. Tells Yelena he knows what to do and they will light a fire. She looks at him puzzled, as if asking whether he means something like her flint and tinder. He smiles and explains that he means a better version of her tool and asks if she knows what matches are. The idea stuns Yelena. She compares how flint needs several strikes to spark, while a match lights with one motion. What a convenient miracle. Oda explains that a lighter will also take time, so they will start with matches. Yelena recalls another tool and asks about it, but instantly grasps the broader idea: mass production of fire. She understands that in a world where fire is rare, even a simple way to ignite it becomes a revolution. Evolution? Once the goal is set, his determination strengthens. Raising a match as a symbol of their project, he says they can do it and with a burning spirit decides to do this first work in the new world. Richter, seeing Jinaka's exhausted and depressed appearance, anxiously asks if he is alright. A dark, gloomy aura swirls around him, and he looks completely drained. He is not. Standing aside next to Yelena, Jinaku admits he is stuck. He thought creating simple matches would be easy, but in reality, everything turned out much more complicated than he expected. In his memory, the cause of failure instantly flashed. He perceived the arcane script of this world as a simple label, carelessly carved the kanji of fire into the magical stone, and when he infused mana into it instead of a gentle flame, a terrible, uncontrollable fire burst out right before him and Alina. Memory fades and he falls to the floor in the present, with Alina standing over him with crossed arms. He confesses it is his fault. He managed to extinguish the flame, but not before she noticed his mistake. He sits hunched over at the table among a pile of failed experiments and now understands. When carving kanji into the principles of the magical stone's operation to combine the necessary power with ease of ignition, a delicate skill is required, which he lacks. Every time he fixes one problem, another arises, and he buries his head in his hands, overwhelmed by the feeling that he has hit a wall and knows nothing. The feeling of failure hit him so sharply that a memory surfaced of being scolded. The naivety of his past was exposed. He once was confident that by applying his modern knowledge, he would easily succeed, and now the thought made him unbearably ashamed. His confused thoughts were interrupted by Richter, who called him by name. Richter looks at him with understanding and says that what Jinaku is trying to do, something that could shake the very foundations of this world, will not be easy. Seeing his emotionally broken state, Richter suggests taking a break and going for a drink. And moved by this, Jinaku quietly sobs, agrees, and thanks his friend. Later, in a noisy tavern, a delicious hearty stew is placed before him. He scoops with a spoon, tastes it, and his eyes widen with pleasant surprise at the rich flavor. While they eat, Richter explains that they are in a large district with many wonderful establishments, and is very glad that Jinaku is enjoying the food. Jinaku thoughtfully agrees that although the food and drinks in his world were good, this new world has its own special and amazing quality. The idea of going bar hopping seems like a pleasant thought after the recent failure. Richter appears delighted by his enthusiasm and readily suggests several establishments. They sit at a table covered with food and drinks. Richter adds that among other things, he enjoys going to bars. Jintaka listens, taking a sip from his mug. He recalls life in his native world. On weekends he ate deliciously and traveled, worked as much as he wanted, and admits that he wants the same life here. His determination is clear. If he manages to successfully pair couples, it will be the first step toward his goal, and this very thought pushes him to move forward despite difficulties. His attention was drawn to the wall nearby, where two people were working. One pointed to a large crack they were going to repair, and Jinika stood nearby, chewing and thoughtfully observing. He turns to Richter with a curious look. The substance they use is nothing like putty or cement. Richter confirms that it is for wall repairs, then reveals the most unexpected slime collected from a magical creature. Further revelation astonishes Jinoku. The idea that walls can be repaired with slime is completely foreign to him and confuses him. To him, Richter briskly explains the process, assuring that creatures are not used alive. The slime is boiled down to a viscous, sticky mass which hardens as it cools, and adds that this substance can be used not only for patching walls. There are many options. He thinks it over. Even monsters in this world sometimes come in handy. Richter confirms that although the material is not the strongest, its low price and ease of processing make it very popular. And this seems exactly what should be in classic fantasy to Jinoku. The advisor does not stop and says that the boiled slime can be mixed with ink to add color, or with crushed stone if it is needed for construction, and the mention of stone instantly captured all of Jinoku's attention. Attention? These words sparked a sudden insight in him. Jenica jumped to his feet, caught Richter off guard, and said he would try something, thanked his comrade and rushed out, the thought of crushing the material for his invention emerging in his mind. If successful, this could be the breakthrough he needed. He worked tirelessly and this thought constantly echoed in his head. Maybe he would really manage to create matches. A few days later, Sandrone appeared in her office and announced that she had come because Jeniku needed to report. She was met by the sight of a completely disheveled Jeniku. Hair and beard had grown after several days of work, and next to him stood no less untidy Yelena, and Sandrone immediately ordered him to tidy himself up. But she quickly changed the subject, saying that although appearance matters, it is not the main thing. She noted that her lighter was starting to fail. It was almost out of fuel. Jeniku, now shaved and calm, simply replied that everything would be fine. He drew confidence from his new invention, showed a small box and called it a completely new device for igniting fire. Yelena enthusiastically added that it was a magical stone match, or MOTTH for short, and the surprised Sandrone just watched while Jeniku told her to watch. With one strike and the stick caught fire, Sandrone froze in complete astonishment. When she demanded to know how it worked, he calmly replied that there was nothing complicated about it. He began to explain his process. The first attempt with a low-quality magical stone with a carved fire symbol produced intense heat, so he ground the stones into powder to tame their power. He continued to explain that he then mixed this stone powder with slime to make the match head. The hardest part, he admitted, was adjusting the fire strength by changing the amount of powder. Here is the final result. Holding a burning match in his hand, he asked if it was easy for her to use it. He added that about 20 seconds of burning is quite enough to start a fire, and that with the necessary equipment, they can be mass-produced cheaply. Cheap, Elena blossomed with a smile and told Sandrone that, although it hurt her to admit it, Jinaku was kind. Sandrone silently pondered this revelation, had discovered the secret sign of fire, and along with it found a way to mass-produce fire itself. She herself sincerely praises Jinaku for the work on Match Eyes and announces that they will launch it into mass production. As a reward, she offers him anything he desires, house or money. In response, he says he has his own proposal. He asked her to keep the money for herself. Instead, he offered to work for her for a whole year so that she could teach him how business is done here in this new world. Sandrone, stunned, asks if he intends to go freelance. He confirms and, explaining his long-term plan, says he will create his own company for developing magical devices and entrusts advertising and sales to her. Her company, she is considering his proposal. Hiring him directly would keep him on a leash, yet she admits that his idea might make sense. However, she is troubled by the question of how his independent venture will ultimately bring profit. The conversation awakens a painful memory. Sandrone sees in her mind a man head of the family who shouted at her and declared that a woman does not need to know about affairs. Her only task is to marry and give the family an heir, repaying the family with her. In her memories, she sits alone in the room and bitterly realizes everything in her life education, future marriage was for the sake of the family, and she had nothing she could choose for herself. To herself, this feeling of helplessness turned into a quiet, unwavering determination. She realized that her life in that house was nothing more than a cage, and she promised herself that she would escape someday. Turning to the present, Sandrone decisively says he wants to live freely. As before, and Jinax, as if understanding, proclaims his philosophy. To create freely, he needs his own company and his own rules. He believes that by working hard, resting fully, and engaging in favorite activities, the best ideas are born. That's just how he leads. On Sandrona's face flashed an expression of understanding. She sees a kindred soul in him and realizes that in this world he also lives a free life. Sandro smiles and agrees to fulfill his request. Yelena is delighted and cannot believe her eyes. Jinika celebrates while Sandro meanwhile is already calculating. Maddie will become the new key product of her company. Alexandrite fire is needed daily, profits will be huge, and in a year their matches will be everywhere. She sighed with regret. It was a pity that he did not ask her as a reward, as if she would have given everything. The young servant Yelena looked on in shock, and Jinaku only smiled and said that the idea of the company led by the inventor himself sounded like. This is exciting. To his enthusiasm, Sandrone responded briefly and sharply, I am not interested, and Jinaku and Yelena froze in shock. Behind them, she clearly explained her position. She was not going to marry and it was best for her to remain single and free. This angered Yelena, who angrily rushed to shout at Jinaku over alleged contempt, and Sandrone only laughed at the scene. It is a coincidence, he replied calmly, because he felt the same and categorically refused marriage. Hearing this, Sandrone blossomed with a smile that enchanted Yelena, and Jinaku silently acknowledged their shared feelings. When their eyes met, they shook hands. Jinaku mentally admitted that he had mistakenly considered Sandrone just an arrogant queen. In reality, she was cheerful, and he thought that they might become friends. After all, their partnership was now official, so Sandrone announced that from now on she would teach him everything about business. Surprised, Jinaku replied that he was looking forward to it, addressing her formally, Professor Sandrone. The first lesson began with her pushing a huge pile of books to him and ordering him to read them all by the next day, adding that she did not like students who skipped homework. Jinaku stood stunned, and Yelena reconsidered her opinion. Sandrone was truly formidable queen. That night, bent over a table covered with piles of texts, Jinaku immersed himself in studying. He knew this was the first step on his path to. His training knew no mercy. In the montage, Yelena is seen pushing him through exhausting physical exercises while he simultaneously devotes himself to learning. He decided that although it was huge work, he would do anything for a second life or even for fourth life. After a year of continuous study and work alongside Yelena, a noticeably more experienced Jenica walks by. He sighs. A sense of accomplishment overwhelms him as he completes this important stage. After training, he stands in front of his new establishment, his face shining with deep satisfaction. Above him hangs a newly made sign thanks to a new magical tool. He thought he made it based on the model from the old store, and it turned out even better than he hoped. Finally, he founds his own company, another step toward that ideal slow life he longed for, and with a determined smile decides to go and buy his new castle. A group of angry shopkeepers lined up opposite the invisible side. One man, bald with glasses around his neck, shouted that this new phenomenon would bury their shops and they would starve. Oda Hennek watched as the scene unfolded, not even surprised he had predicted it. A year ago, the Alexandrite Trading Company under Sandrone's leadership held a briefing for shops that shared fire to present a new product called matches, which caused a completely expected storm of outrage. During the briefing, Sandrone showed how convenient the new thing was and challenged the gathered merchants. Do you really put customers first if you oppose such a useful thing? Oda, standing in the crowd, noticed her tactics and decided she was ruthless. She tried to calm their fear and assured that she did not come to intimidate them, so Sandrone laid out her business proposal. Shops that share fire should become the sole sellers of matches, working subcontracted with the Alexandrite Trading Company, and she promised a powerful advertising campaign and guaranteed that their profits would soar. The bald shopkeeper slammed his fist on the table and shouted that his shop was the oldest in the capital, indignantly rejecting any orders to take down the sign that his family had carried for generations. And the Sandrone people simply replied that from now on he would replace the shared fire shop sign with a match shop sign. Sandrone remained completely unshaken, and Oda suddenly realized how bad it was. For these families whose shops had kept people afloat for years, changing the sign was a devastating blow to pride, and the bald shopkeeper and his son stood shoulder to shoulder, as if to say they had guarded that sign even before her birth and would not tolerate such nonsense. The son tried to convince him, saying they could still run the shop as a match shop, but the father turned away and silently clenched his fist in irritation. The father's anger finally burst out. He yelled at his son, admitting that he barely had the fire gift in himself and could not run a real fire shop like his predecessors, and Oda overheard this painful confession. The son explained that in this world the fire element is rare and not always passed from father to child, which is why some shops have to close. And while this tender family moment lasted, Sandrone approached Oda from behind and said, "Hey brother, your shop really matters to you, huh?" Ignoring Sandrone, the son looked decisively at his father and said that he really wanted to save their shop, even if it was not to share fire, because he loved the place that had supported their community for so many years. And hearing this, the father's stern face softened and blossomed into a proud, sincere smile. He watched attentively as Oda Jinaku talked about his past and frankly admitted that he too had taken on the family business out of respect. Oda said that although he had changed his line of work, the essence remained the same as his parents and grandparents to do what supports people's everyday lives. Then he turned to the shopkeeper with a question, hinting that his son simply wanted to continue the true legacy he had guarded. Moved, the old man finally gave in. He put his hand on his son's shoulder, his face softened. He blessed him, saying, "Do as you wish, you will become the next owner of the shop anyway, so try hard," and the son, overwhelmed with emotion, could only whisper his name. When the family quarrel was settled, Ode turned his attention to the other gathered merchants. He sincerely admitted that he was not strong with fire magic and began to praise matches, saying they were so small that they were convenient to sell on site and deliver, which meant there was a chance to expand the circle of buyers. His speech, supported by the blessing of the oldest store in the capital, turned out to be a great success. The merchants erupted in a wave of enthusiasm, crowding around Ode and shouting that they wanted to switch to selling matches and sign contracts, and he was momentarily stunned by this chaotic but joyful reaction. Meanwhile, in the moving carriage, Richter noticed that the problem with the shops sharing fire had been resolved peacefully. Sandrone smiled, thanked Hennek for the helpful push, and admitted that she was glad everything had not escalated. She was reviewing the newly acquired contracts with a satisfied smile, praising the speed of the transition and the scale of the achievement, while Richter, on the contrary, became serious and reminded her that now, as the president of the company, she would have to think about the future of the trading firm Alexandrite, because their circumstances were not at all like those of small shops. But her ambitions did not end there. With a determined gleam in her eyes, Sandrone announced her next step. They would use these results to approach the royal house of Edelstein. Her goal was to establish a connection with the royal family at any cost, and Richter and Ode just watched, stunned by her relentless determination. The next year went exactly as Sandrone had planned. Matches exploded in wild popularity, becoming needed not only in homes but also by travelers. While her team worked tirelessly, she saved money and knowledge to enjoy a new life, and eventually the royal family gave their consent, establishing matches as the main full-fledged business of the Alexandrite Company. After a year of such progress, a new day came, and now proudly stood the building with the sign "Ode, a Magic Tool Development Lab." On the day of the grand opening, Sandrone and Richter appeared to sincerely congratulate. Standing in front of his new store, Otis thought that the sign made everything truly real. Nearby appeared a warm image of a grandfather. He looked at the store and said that everything was perfect. He stands in the doorway of his new workshop when Sandrone and Richter approach to congratulate. They brought wine. He warmly thanks them, does not make a fuss at the threshold, and invites them inside. Inside, Sandrone notices that the move-in ready housing is quite pleasant, already furnished, and has a shower, toilet, and bed. Bedroom, the guests find him already at the workbench, immersed in drawings. Everyone is surprised that he started work so early. Sandrone looks at the list and asks about a filter for dirty water, but Ode dismisses this and directly says that he wants to make a coffee maker, which astonishes Richter. Director, Sandrone ironically waved off his taste, saying that anyone who does not appreciate good coffee is still a child. The scene shifts to the market, where Ode asks the seller for coffee beans and notes that he likes the pleasantly bitter coffee of this world. Unlike tea, she asked if his own shop inspires ideas. He agreed that partly yes, but explained that he had already written them down in a notebook. And Sandrone cut in that he was probably the only person in the world who would dare to call her a child. Shifting the conversation to business, she asks if she can order new devices. After all, this is a Magitech workshop. He evasively replies that it all depends on his mood and he doesn't want to become too famous and lose his weekends. Brushing it off as if indifferent, Sandro still feels ideas swirling in his head about what he could build for her. Seeing her delight, Oda smiles and says he has a bunch of plans he wants to try, and if he creates something fun she can play with, he will definitely let her know. No, he smiles, noticing that now she is much more energetic than when she worked for a salary. She beams, agreeing that working for oneself is truly the best. The best? Her face becomes thoughtful. She notices his unwavering independence and says that after a year of working together, she thought he would have at least once proposed to her. Then her voice softens, and she asks if he thinks they will continue to get along one day. He warmly agrees that they will, but emphasizes, they are just good work partners and that seems to suit her. Sandrone says she has relaxed a bit and returns, leaving Oda on his new bee. The beginning, nearby stood a quiet sand drone. Richter shared with Oda, he noticed that although the company's growth is great news, it is also very hard on his beloved. Oda asked calmly with a smile what exactly he meant. He explained that Oda's presence calmed her greatly, and asked him to remind her not to take everything on herself. Richter added that, in his opinion, they would soon need Oda's help again, a request that momentarily caught Oda by surprise. The conversation ended, and Sandrone and Richter set off. From below on the street, they looked up and saw Oda waving to them from the window at her new job. He watched them walk away, then turned his gaze back to the room. A feeling of ownership washed over him as he surveyed his new workshop, and thought that he had finally acquired his own show. In the castle, satisfaction quickly ignited determination. For the sake of his dear new friends, Jinaku began to act, unfolded a large sheet of paper, and decided it was time to invent a Magitech device that would help them. Oda Jinaku, completely satisfied with his bachelor life, constantly dreams of one blissful image, an iced drink. He imagines the simple joy of that sip and becomes even more convinced that the freedom to be single is the best life. But in reality, he just collapsed on the table, completely exhausted. He notices that this new world, like his old one, has 4 seasons, and the temperatures throughout the year are almost the same as in Japan, so living here under the bright scorching sun is a bit easier. When the weather warms up and summer approaches, a strong thirst awakens in him, and with a tired sigh he finally admits he wants an ice-cold beer. In his mind appears the image of that incredible elite wine that was gifted. But in this stifling heat, sweating all day, that is not what he craves. He needs that unparalleled bliss of a cold drink. With renewed determination, his fists clench, he must prepare it. Full of resolve, he approaches his workbench and takes out a wooden box full of small round goblin magical stones. He has plenty of them. He begins carving kanji on their surfaces. This is how he endows them with certain magical effects. He chooses one stone to start working on. The stones are ready, so he glances at the box that will hold them, unable to shake the feeling that the ability to grant magical effects simply by carving kanji is an incredible advantage, a real cheat. He is lost in deep thought, a schematic of the refrigerator's cooling system flickering in his imagination as he puzzles over its design. He recalls his first experiment based on a water refrigerator. It was futile. The cold affected only the magical stone itself, and the inside of the box barely changed. He realized he needed to make it more airtight, but he felt something was still wrong. An idea strikes him. Slime is perfect for this. To spread it as a sealant and cool it so it hardens, hoping this will solve his insulation problem. He finds a suitable gasket and marvels enthusiastically at how useful the slime he used is. From a repairman's perspective, it is as powerful an aid as the spellcraft itself, and he understands that with the right ideas its possibilities are almost limitless, so he decides to test different types of magical stones for his project. When the last detail was in place, he stepped back, wiped the sweat from his forehead. The prototype is ready, a refrigerator with an ice maker. The first tests revealed a problem. A low-rank goblin stone filled with cold air was suitable for the refrigerator, but too weak for the freezer. It could only form a thin layer of ice before the stone cracked from the strain, so he decided to look for ways to strengthen its durability and power, and to ask for advice. Walking through the city, the shop owner with fire and his son noticed him, cheerfully called out to the Magitech master and asked how his affairs were going. The seller shines with joy and says that although deliveries have increased, the work is much easier and profits have grown. Oda smiles, glad to hear such news. He continues and says that selling fire has become simpler and he no longer needs to guard the flame all day, so he got an assistant and took his family on a trip. And with a tear on his smile, he tells how he drank with his son and how his wife scolded him, sincerely thanking the matches that saved them. Oda's heart warms when he learns that other shops sharing fire are also grateful. And with a smile he notices that strangely many young men have recently married, aloud wondering where this happy wind blows from. The shopkeeper smiles and confirms. He says that earlier many young guys were too busy to look for wives. Now, having more time, weddings have increased, and he enthusiastically asks Oda to continue supporting them. The task is done. Oda rushes to the Adventurers Guild, arrives out of breath, and immediately runs into a man behind the counter, Hexen, who asks why he is so out of breath. Oda simply replies that it is a long story. Hexen asks if he is on Sandrin's assignment, but Oda calmly says that now everything is different. He has become independent, takes out a business card and surprises Hexen, and most importantly, announces that he has purchased magical stones. He explains to the guild master Hexen that a calm solo business suits him better. That is where his best ideas are born. Hexen, leaning on the counter, asks for an example, and Oda names Alexandrite trade, noting its explosive growth over the past year and that it is probably well paid. Hearing about a good idea, Oda leans in conspiratorially and with a smile, reveals his dream, a Magitech device that instantly cools drinks to icy temperature. And an interested expression appears on Hexen's face. The guild master immediately becomes enthusiastic about this idea and dreams aloud what a miracle it would be to drink something ice clear like mountain water. A thought that comes to his mind again every summer. Oda, noticing a kindred spirit, agrees and adds that it is even better when the glass itself is cooled. A pure desire appears on Hexen's face, and he exclaims that he wants such a drink. Agreeing to buy, Hexen asks Oda to purchase for him as soon as the device is ready. He gets to work, asks what type of magical stone Oda needs, explains that stones are ranked by stars, and rushes to find something with a rank higher than wolf. The magical stone ranking system is tied to monster types, a miserable goblin 1 star and a majestic dragon 10. While Hexen reviews the inventory, Alina approaches and greets warmly, and he says that although they have 5-star stones from metal orcs, most of the stock is 2-star, the same as the wolves, and 3 stars would be ideal for Oda's project. But the higher the rank, the more expensive the stone. Price. Just as Hexen finishes explaining the situation with the supplies, the guild doors suddenly open and a trio of young adventuresses confidently enter the hall. The trio consists of Blanche, a woman dressed in clothing resembling a nun's habit, Rosso, a fiery warrior with 2 ponytails, and Io, a quiet girl with a short butt. Bob. They approach the counter. Hexen asks if they have anything to turn in, and the girl named Rosso cheerfully says they have 20 Delacandors. They are currently being processed. She shifts her attention to Oda and asks if he is a Magitech engineer because he is looking for stones. Excitedly, she says that 3-star stones are suitable for very impressive projects. Hexen smiles and confirms, adding that Delacandor stones are exactly 3-star, calling it a real jackpot for. Oda overheard this, and suddenly surprise lit up in Rosso's eyes. She leaned toward Oda and blurted out, "A Magitech device that can create ice." She presses him, demanding details, exclaiming that in all their trips to parties they have never heard of such a device. And Oda confirms that although it is not yet finished, it only has 1 step left to completion. When he confirms this, the nun Blanche immediately pays attention to him and says he must be a skilled Magitech engineer. Oda, smiling a little shyly, explains that he just opened a shop and is not taking many orders yet. But despite his modesty, Rosso immediately asks if he will build the device for them if they submit an official request. And after a minute of thought, he agrees. This causes Rosso to shout with excitement. He insists that they definitely visit his workshop and demands to know where it is. Promising to visit again, the 3 adventurers wave goodbye and leave. As they exit, Hexen tells Oda that these kids are S-rank and already do everything better than him, and the guildmaster adds that he sincerely wants to see young adventurers succeed following their example, leaving Oda momentarily speechless. After they left, Oda again turns his gaze to the pouch of recently acquired magical stones. A confident smile blooms on his face. He clenches one of the stones and, eagerly wanting to get to work, decides to process them immediately and finally finish his refrigerator. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Sandrone sits at a table reading a document, her expression sharp, eyes shining with sudden insight. It became clear to her. This smells like good earnings. Her advisor Richter notices this sudden tension and asks what she is thinking about. Oda Jindoku leans over his creation, his face tense with concentration, carefully examining the fruit of his labor. He picks up a piece, touches it, checks the texture and cold. With a satisfied expression, he declares the project complete. He managed to make solid ice. But his work is far from finished. He knows well that the work of a Magitech engineer is not limited to manufacturing, and there are still many tasks ahead. He takes the necessary papers, compiling a technical description for the prototype, a familiar task from his old world. But in this world, he also needs to apply for the magical script itself. He knows that the scripts he creates are his property, and if he does not register the symbol he invented for cold air for the device that makes ice, his rights will not be recognized. He considers the consequences of this system and feels how valuable such an orderly system is. For merchants, using registered magical writing without proper permission is a serious violation, which the guild punishes with heavy fines and penalties, disgrace that can lead to a complete ban on trading. With the documents in hand, he mentally runs through the next steps. He must take the application to the trade guild to have the magical inscription checked. If there are no problems, it will be officially registered. The application for the magical script and the structural brief of the Ice Master look organized. As soon as the registration is complete, he will head straight to Alexandrite Trading to sell both the prototype and the documentation, and he already reaches for the door handle, ready to go. When he opened the door wide, he was suddenly met with a surprise. Sandrone and her advisor Richter were standing right in his way, and the commander gasped. He stepped back a little, said they scared him, and asked why they came, and Sandrone quickly recovered and smiled. Perfect timing, she was nearby and decided to drop by. In the doorway, she adds that she has something to show him, and her words echo in the quiet workshop. While she and Richter sat and waited, Oda Jiniku shyly apologized for the lack of hospitality. He just realized he had never bought tea for guests, and asked if water would do, mumbling to himself that he hadn't thought to get tea like a normal person. Then he placed a mug on the table in front of them. The clinking of ice cubes inside was heard as he remarked on how hot it was today. What was on the side of the mug literally stunned Sandrone and Richter. They froze speechless. Their eyes widened in deep disbelief. Leaning forward, Sandrone pointed with a trembling finger, her voice trembling as she asked if it was really ice. And Oda calmly confirmed it, enjoying her theatrical reaction. Her calm shattered. Thoughts raced. She froze, looking at the cubes and repeatedly asking herself if those were real eyes, forcing herself to calm down. Richter was no less stunned. He shouted to his lady that it was real ice, and his shock was reflected in her eyes. Oda matter-of-factly explained that he had made a refrigerator with an ice generator and handed over a sheet with specifications. Sandrone's surprise instantly turned into a terrible predatory tension that materialized into a roaring tiger looming over him. Oda flinched and jumped back, thinking for a moment that he was about to be eaten. Her blazing aura faded as she leaned over the documents, fascinated by his invention and marveling at what kind of mind could have come up with it. Oda explained his logic. With summer approaching, people would want coolness, so a market for iced drinks and dishes would appear. As Sandrone reviewed the specifications, she noticed that for the prototype he used a budget third-level stone, specifically Delacandor. Sandrone thought that for commercial use they would need a stronger device with 4 stones, and Oda agreed, admitting that even 3-stone models are considered expensive, so the 4-stone option would make the device inaccessible to most buyers. Then he sharply suggested, "Maybe rent it out," he enthusiastically explained. In his world, this is a common thing. Instead of selling an expensive device, it was simply lent out, and people paid for using Magitech. He imagined a typical modern car, a common item for such deals at home. He continued laying out his plan, confidently explaining that if the rented item broke, the company would repair it themselves and just charge a separate fee. So for the client, it was almost a risk-free offer. He said this model is extremely convenient for clients who need equipment only seasonally, for example, an ice generator in summer. It makes usage much easier and does not force them to store a bulky device all year round. Then he officially presented the idea to Sandrone, acknowledging that due to the high price there are few buyers, but the rental system could sharply boost usage. Sandrone listened attentively and realized that they also have expensive Magitech that could benefit from such a model. She returned to her advisor Richter, and he confirmed her unspoken thought with a simple, "Yes, madam." "Madam?" Hearing his confirmation, Sandrone immediately put the plan into action. She ordered Richter to first thing in the morning take care of registering the scenario and other paperwork. Oda suggested they take the prototype with them, and Richter confirmed the order. When Richter lifted the device, Sandrone quietly but decisively said that tomorrow she would entrust Alina to lead the engineers to analyze the prototype. There was almost no time left until summer, but they would give their all to launch it into production. Lingering in the doorway, Richter turns to Oda, calling him Jeniku, and says that they will pay a fee for the idea for this Magitech and something more. Sandrone explained the terms in more detail. Soon he would be paid a fee for creating the rental system itself, and when it turned into a product, of course, royalties would be paid, and Oda was stunned, so he, confused, asked if it was really possible to take that much. Look, as she prepares to leave, Sandrone gives a quiet, grateful smile and tells Jinok that he really did it, always coming up with such ideas that she could never have imagined. Meanwhile, Oda thought he would go to bed early, but everything turned out differently. Just as he thinks the night is over, Sandrone sharply stops him with a sudden tug on his tie and pulls him close. Their faces are just a few centimeters apart in a moment of tense, unspoken confrontation. At the station, she held him back, her face only a few centimeters from his, and with a blush and a burning, impatient look, said that because of him she was now too excited to sleep. She just as suddenly let him go and turned away. Richter, who was looking stunned, came to his senses when she called him to go. He obediently left, carrying the prototype box, and left Oda watching them go with a tense, sweaty smile. Smile? As soon as the door closed behind him, his strength left him. He fell to the floor, and the tension drained from his body. It almost ended badly. He really believed that he was about to be eaten. Finally, the long-awaited refrigerator with an ice maker is ready. Oda Jinok thinks that as soon as it hits the market, royalties will pour in like a river. So he decides to entrust the final fine-tuning to Yell On. When he leaves the workshop and the door clicks shut behind him, he is overcome by that familiar emptiness after completing an exciting job. Someone shouted they called him a Magitech engineer. It was the city guard who said that Oda was no longer on duty and that he himself was just about to go home for dinner. The mention of dinner sparks an idea. Oda admits that he is craving fish, but he has not yet found a good place to eat, and nearby a food vendor overhears his desire. She enthusiastically recommends Manak's Tavern on 3rd Street and praises their incredible fried, salted, and dried fish. So passionate about her love of food that she also recommends Repario Cafeteria on 4th, but clarifies that the real star there is their lunch menu, and Oda seems interested specifically in the mention of dried fish. He again draws attention to the guard and regrets that he is on the night's shift. The guard explains that Magitech for lighting is too expensive, so they still use torches, which cause a lot of trouble at night. Understanding this, Oda asks him to wait a little. He hands the watchman a small cylindrical device and tells him to touch the switch and feed it some mana. The watchman, puzzled, takes it, and as soon as he touches it, a blinding beam of light bursts from the device, making him exclaim in shock. "What is this?" This device is essentially a homemade headlamp. At its heart is a goblin stone with a carved rune of light, inserted into a simple sturdy tube with a cap for lighting. The watchman was stunned and exclaimed that this light blows out torches and is much easier to use. Oda asked him to test the device during his shift and give feedback, adding that if it works well, he might turn it into a real product. The watchman was shocked that such a useful thing was created just on a whim. As he began to leave, Oda glanced at the newly installed refrigerator and mentally admired how incredible the Magitech engineers are, and the guard shouted after him, thanked him for the food advice, and said they would see each other again. He thinks with satisfaction everything turned out for the better. The guards will get better tools for work, and in return he gets advice on where to eat well. A fair exchange. He enjoys the meal, simple but extremely tasty bread. Everything is perfect. Having finished, he sets off. The next day dawn breaks. The next morning, as he is pondering plans for the day, the door of his workshop suddenly bursts open. Fiercely Sandrone stands in the entrance and shouts if he is here. Startled, he raises his head and sees not only Sandrone but also the stocky watchman from that night. Sandrone points accusingly and sternly orders him not to go alone anymore, and Oda just looks back confused. The guard nodded. Oda should not take his creations so lightly. Sandro's sharp gaze fell on Oda again when she directly asked him, "Isn't he the one who created and spread Magitech?" A stern expression on her face, she orders him to pass all future projects through first. Having said everything, Sandrone switches. She turns to the guard and asks how the light Magitech performed. The guard's face lit up with genuine delight. He exclaims that it was incredible and made his patrol much easier. He enthusiastically praises how the handheld lantern highlights details and illuminates wherever he looks. Sandrone listens with barely noticeable irritation, and Oda smiles, pleased with the praise. "You satisfied?" Oda asked about problem areas, whether the brightness ever weakened. The guard replied no, but added that after the night watch the stone finally cracked just before dawn. Oda noted that for a low-quality stone this was expected, and a better one would be needed. The guard nervously asks how much he owes, and Oda just laughs and says it's completely free, he only needs feedback. He promises to refine the device and offers the guard to try the updated version, to which he enthusiastically agrees. He smiles indifferently while Sandro, pointing at him with an accusing finger, speaks sharply. She reminds him of what she just said. Her irritation is visible. His smile faded and his face became serious. He leaned closer and asked to say one thing. Sandrone, surprised, asks what this has to do with their quarrel and insists it's a different matter, and he replies that he is grateful to her for everything. She helped and gave him a roof over his head, and he considers it a real debt. Stepping back a step, they continue the conversation on the roof. Sandrone says she wants to remain free, that's exactly why she became independent, and Oda clarifies that he is not at all implying that his inventions, matches or refrigerator, are meant to settle scores. Or he lays out his philosophy. He learned to turn ideas into business. When inspiration comes, he acts immediately, sometimes lending his Magitech to people without consulting her, as with the lantern inspired by the Guardian's torch, and with a determined look reminds that they were supposed to be equals, doubting whether to do everything only her way or if this is true equality. His words hung in the air between them. In the ensuing silence, Sandro gently places her hand on his chest. After a pause, she raises her eyes to him and says he is right, she was selfish. Thanking him for his understanding, she sees his face soften, and he replies that it's okay, admitting he was a bit harsh too. When the tension finally eased, Sandrone told more about her motives. She explained that partly she wants to prevent his talent from leaking out, but much more simply wants to have him only for herself. She noted that he is the only man who speaks to her so directly, because most men just give in to the lady's whims. Slightly embarrassed, Oda laughed and said she values him too highly, to which Sandrone quietly replied. Her moment of vulnerability passes, she smiles and calls their balanced union a true miracle. Deciding it's time to go, she apologizes for disturbing, and Oda watches her leave with a warm smile and says goodbye. Farewell. When Sandro leaves, her advisor Richter approaches Oda, swears deeply, solemnly holding his hat in his hands and apologizes for any troubles his lady might have caused. Oda lightly waved off his apologies and told him not to worry. Still embarrassed, Richter explained that he stepped away for a moment and didn't manage to stop her from approaching. Approaching? He laughed, scratched the back of his head, and told about a recent conversation with Sandro and Richter. He recounted her passionate words saying that if it weren't for him, she would have killed that person. And then Oda added that he heard she was going through hard times, and honestly admitted that he himself had also been quite pushy with her. Well then Richter laughed loudly, reading Sandro's words as a sign of great trust. Oda seemed to accept this with a smile, and Richter, switching gears, entrusted him to pick up the lamp's blueprints and prototypes. Oda immediately volunteered to check the magical script himself and handle the registration, saying he had time. And Richter gladly agreed, leaving the matter in his hands. As he walked away, Oda pondered his position. He knew he would never be able to fully repay Sandrone, who saved his life when he was suddenly thrown into this new world. Although he would do his best to protect his peaceful new life, the burden of debt still weighed on him. Looking at the radiant spherical device in his hand, emitting soft light, he decided that to remain on equal footing with her, he had only one option: to constantly do something good for her. In the Commercial Guild, the central hub for business affairs, patents, and registration of magical scripts, the receptionist raised her eyes, wide open in surprise. Holding a document, she exclaimed to the man before her. "Jidikov again." Oda Janaku flashed a bright, reassuring smile and advised the receptionist, whom he calls Gloria, not to act so shocked. Standing before her counter, Gloria notes that she has never seen an engineer from Magitech submit new scripts so often. He asks if this is not usual for engineers. Gloria, looking closely at the script, retorts that at this rate his products will soon cover the whole country. Intrigued, she asks if he recently became independent, and he says yes. Her question prompted Oda to think, and he told that his daughter also recently became independent, warmly imagining how she fulfilled a childhood dream and opened a small flower shop. And although the place is small, she manages wonderfully there. Gloria's face softened into a warm smile, and she proudly says that her daughter is a real hard worker. Behind the counter, Oda agrees. Taking on a business alone is never easy, whether big or small, and her daughter is clearly succeeding. He suddenly turns and with a smile says he is categorically against marriage. Gloria replies, "Don't you need someone to rely on now after such hard work?" She adds that her daughter is good, teasing him a little. Gloria laughed, called him a ladies' man, and jokingly remarked that if she weren't married, she would invite him for a drink. Oda waved off the compliment, saying that if that woman is her daughter, she must be amazing and will definitely find someone better than him. A lighthearted, joking conversation ends with Oda and Gloria laughing heartily. When he finally finished writing the magical script, Oda left the trade guild and immediately noticed the neighboring Magitech shop. It was incredibly stocked with goods. Oda thought that creating is not only about the result but also about what you start with, and decided to quickly peek inside. Inside the shop, neatly stacked plates and mugs, several large carafes or coffee pots, and open drawers filled with dozens of small spherical balls, probably raw materials or magical cores. He enters the Magitech shop and immediately notices that it looks more like a hardware center. There is special equipment and a bunch of everyday goods. He mentally reminds himself to buy soap when the seller from the side, as if recognizing him, asks if he is the famous Magitech engineer. While he was examining the many Magitech components, a cheerful voice sounded. It was the group of 3 female travelers he had already met. The girl with 2 ponytails, Rasso, waved happily, greeted him, and asked if he had finished the Magitech device for creating ice that he was working on. He confirms that he has it and adds that the device will soon appear on the market. The adventurers listen, noticeably excited by this news. At that moment, the nun Blanche gently reminds Rosso that they have not yet had the chance to properly introduce themselves, and Rosso suddenly shudders, realizing this. Apologizing for the late introduction, the travelers solemnly introduced themselves as the Red Camellia of Fresh Blood Squad. Rosso their swordsman, the quiet girl with a bob cut out their assassin, and Blanche their white sorceress. And Oda, a little embarrassed by their youthful enthusiasm, responded to the greeting. He, in turn, introduces himself as Geniku from the Oda Magitech workshop, noticing that they gathered in the shop. He asks if they are preparing for a journey, to which Rosso replies that in a certain sense, yes. She cheerfully tells that a few days ago a monster tore their tent, so they came to buy a new one. Smiling, she adds that they made the monster pay, dismantled it for materials, and got a magical stone. And Oda listens attentively, and this everyday phrase about survival of the fittest makes him think. Rosso says they need a replacement looking for a better tent because the usual ones are heavy and troublesome to set up. Oda examines a simple model, just fabric on metal poles, and understands their disappointment. For him, this is not just an adventuring problem, it is a serious matter, and a fire flashes in his eyes as he realizes that his own passion coincides with this problem. He loves camping. An idyllic picture instantly arises in his mind. He sets up a tent as his little base in the wild, warms himself by a cozy fire, sips coffee, and simply relaxes among beautiful landscapes. He thinks, although he has tried auto camping a little, in his soul he is a fan of camping in a tank. A night under the stars, when food and drinks seem to have a different taste, gives that special pleasure he knows well. He reflects on the essence of camping in this world. Although part of its charm is the ability to enjoy discomforts, here tents are simply functional beds without any leisure, and an idea slowly forms in his mind. The thought turns into determination. He says aloud, "I will just do it," and thereby stuns the adventurers from the Red Camellia party who look at him with confused faces. He clarifies his intention. He plans to craft several useful things for field camping, and his mind is already working first considering the most necessary items that will make camping truly comfortable. Excited, he describes his plan, a lightweight tent that unfolds and folds in seconds. The idea instantly excites Rasso. She shouts, demanding to know the price. Her companions go crazy as well and are ready to buy, but Oda quickly stops them, reminding that he hasn't even built it yet. He explains to the smiling guild craftsman Hexen that it is still just an idea. The design is almost entirely in his head, and he still needs to obtain the materials. Hexen says that these adventurers are young S-rank, and Rosso, hearing this, proudly replies that as an S-rank party they can get anything he needs. The companions immediately surrounded the embarrassed Oda and gladly offered help to hunt, gather, or do whatever is needed, telling him to leave everything to them. To them, when he tries to calm their enthusiasm, Rasso suggests simply hiring them through an official request. This thought makes Oda think he knows that hiring S-rank usually involves a solid commission and wonders if he can even afford it. Them seeing his hesitation, Rosso looks at him sincerely. She insists that they really need this equipment and offers an unexpected idea. What if making it their job to obtain it? He has not yet recovered the unusual job offer from them hung in the air. But before he could process everything, Rosso decisively stated that she would take the matter, specifying that she wants a simple-to-use tent for herself, and her companions gladly agreed. The deal was sealed. Oda pondered this new scheme. Until then, his inventions were only wholesale ideas like matches or small coolers, which he simply handed over to Alexandrite Trading and did not engage with them further. But it was different. The adventuress with a bob, Ao, looked one by one at her comrades and at Oda and declared that they would become his very first independent client. A sudden epiphany struck Oda like a burst of creative energy. His hands itched with anticipation. His enthusiasm was shared by Rasso, who grabbed his hand and began to pull him away, insisting they immediately go to the store to discuss materials. Suddenly, Oda shouted at her to slow down. His hands trembled involuntarily. When they hurriedly led him down the street, the importance of the moment finally dawned on him. Everything happened suddenly, but this was officially the first order for the Oda Magitech workshop. When they approached his workshop, the group froze. Blanche aloud pondered the project a tent. Seeing his new clients ready and full of enthusiasm, Oda armed himself with determination. It was time to fully focus and give his all for his first official order. Near the large wooden frame building, the adventurous Rasso approaches Oda Jinoku. She asks if this impressive structure is his company, and he simply answers yes. Her companions Ao and Blanche join her and skeptically look around the building. Rosso says that this is just a workshop, and a real company should sell things, and Blanche adds that it looks more like a warehouse. He turns to them with a slight grimace, apologizes, and explains that all sales are made by third-party companies. Hearing this, Ao is openly disappointed. She had hoped to see all kinds of magical technologies. Changing the subject, he said he was going to start drawing plans and suggested they wait in his office upstairs. Rosso's eyes lit up. She impatiently asked if they could look, confessing she had never seen a Magitech engineer at work. He sighs inwardly, feeling like the leader of a school excursion. His thoughts are interrupted by Ao and Blanche, who also want to look, and Oda resignedly agrees, warning that there probably won't be anything interesting. Now in a vest and tie, Oda stands by his desk with a pen in hand, and three adventurers, holding their breath, watch him. Their previous skepticism has turned into genuine curiosity. Rosso watches in fascination as the tip of his pen glides over the paper. Precise scratching sounds, he marks lines and technical notes, creating a complex diagram out of nothing. She watches, and on the page a shading scheme seems to emerge. Ao leans in and asks if it is a shading drawing, and Oda confirms. He says this is just the base and he will add more details, which Ao finds very cool. Io, the amazed one, asks if you can imagine how a tent unfolds in the head to sketch it. Looking at the finished drawing, Oda says that's roughly how it works, and Rosso looks on with wide eyes in admiration. His simple confirmation leaves the three adventurers speechless. Blanche, Rosso, and A.O. look at him, their faces full of awe and deep admiration for the incredible skill they just witnessed. She and her companions were still thrilled listening as Oda declared the design ready, then spoke about materials. He needed a part like a rod flexible so it wouldn't break, yet light, and he asked if they knew any good materials. The short-haired adventurer Io instantly threw out an idea. Duralumin and snake bone, the material had to be light, unbreakable, flexible, and in rod form, and Oda repeated the name, intrigued. She explained in detail that it was the only flexible bone from a serpent-like monster. It had no joints but bent and twisted to move. Although not strong enough for weapons or armor, its lightness and durability made it an ideal candidate. The name struck a chord with him. Duralumin, an aluminum alloy used in his world for tent frames and stakes, and he decided it was fate, seriously considering the idea. Seeing his interest, Rosso eagerly agreed to try and promised to procure the material. After some time, the workshop door burst open. Rosso, with companions nearby, rushed in and announced their return, apologizing for being late but their appearance shocked. All were scratched and dirty. Otis froze in stunned silence, and Rosso cheerfully added that they managed to get the material. The surprise gave way to grim realization. He looked at the battered adventurers and said dryly, "Well, you went monster hunting." The Hunt AO grimly confirmed his assessment. It was no simple matter. Duralumin and snakes were fierce, plus it was breeding season and they lived near griffins. She noted that if it were only snakes, they wouldn't be so beaten, but Rosso waved it off, insisting that as S-rank adventurers they managed. Her frivolity did not calm him at all. Oda's face hardened with anger and anxiety. He demanded explanations for her sudden change in behavior and reproached them for not warning him in advance how tough the job would be. However, the three travelers seemed completely unfazed. They simply said it was their job and such things happen all the time. This answer only irritated Odamer. He replied that it was just a tent for sleeping outdoors. Cheaper and simpler materials could have been used, and insisted it wasn't worth them getting hurt. His words hit the heart. Rosso's smile disappeared. Her face became stern. She looked straight at him and said firmly that for adventurers a tent is not some trifle to be brushed off. Her serious expression did not waver when Oda finally began to explain his reasoning. He looked at all three and said directly that for a traveler, the quality of the camp is a matter of life and death. Blanche's voice flared, and she unfolded her thought, explaining that the greatest threat to adventurers is not the mighty monsters they fight, but something much more insidious. Fatigue, she continued, painting a grim picture of the consequences. A simple mistake due to exhaustion during a resource-gathering quest can throw someone off a cliff. Fatigue, she emphasized, deprives an adventurer of clear judgment, dulls their sharpness, and gives even the weakest monster a fatal advantage. Rosso picked up. They came to rest at least a little from this constant fatigue, but she added, carrying a heavy tent for this is a big problem. Ao agreed, saying that it is impossible to fight properly with a heavy backpack, and monsters definitely will not wait until they drop their gear. Moreover, even if they drag the tent to the spot, difficult conditions may not allow it to be set up, and they will remain defenseless. Vulnerability is a constant threat. Too often travelers are ambushed by monsters before they have time to prepare for battle. Oda listened tensely, and the adventurers frankly admitted. This is the harsh truth of their profession. Until now they had seen too many comrades die exactly like that. He swallowed their words, and a heavy realization slowly descended on him. For him, the idea of adventurers had so far been only an abstract invention from games and light novels. Finally he understood. His notions were shaped by stories where travelers easily take quests, slay monsters, and take loot, but this, as he now saw, is the real world, a world of flesh and blood where it is rarely so simple. Seeing how he had changed, Rosso's face lit up with admiration. The idea of a tent that is both light and sets up in seconds filled her with hope. She explained that such a thing would make travels much less dangerous not only for them but for every adventurer, and with renewed zeal begged him to create. Her pleas did not cease. She asked him to create a light and compact tent specifically for adventures, and under the gaze of their companions promised that they would do everything to help him succeed. In response, he raised his hands and sharply slapped both his cheeks with a ringing click, stunning the traveler. Three women jumped back in surprise and asked what was wrong, and he calmly explained that he was just cheering himself up and getting ready for the task. He looked down and a wave of realization washed over him. He admitted to himself that he had completely underestimated the essence of the adventurer's work, considering the tent only for occasional camping and not understanding the true needs of the client. So he decided from now on the responsibility was on him. With new determination, he tightened the strap of his work glove, and the metal latch clicked into place. Taking his place, he turned to the adventurers, his face unwavering. He declared that he would stake his craft pride to create a truly good thing that would justify their expectations, and when the women looked with renewed hope, he assured them that he was ready to be. At first, with the travelers' shining smiles behind his back, he thrust his fist forward and announced that the tent crafting begins now. It was time to show what this old man was really capable of. As Oda prepared to get to work, three adventurers Rosso, Blanche, and Ao pressed in on him from all sides. Their faces too close and embarrassed, he exclaimed that they were standing too close. And although he understood their eager curiosity, he sternly ordered them to step back, explaining that what he was about to do could be dangerous. Stepping a little aside, he announced that the first step was the frame. He lifted a long, flexible strip of material, his gloved hands gripping it firmly. He tested its properties by stretching it between his hands and noticed, in this state it was a bit too stiff for his purposes. To fix this, he decided to heat it, and the three adventurers held their breath watching as he infused the material with fire magic, and it began to glow. His display of power elicited admiring sighs from the spectators. They were impressed that he possessed a rare gift for fire magic. Next, he turned his attention to the ground. He asked for some space, cast earth magic, and raised a perfectly smooth, even layer of soil while the adventurers watched, not understanding why he needed this. Without stopping, he showed another element. He summoned a powerful stream of water with water magic, which arced over the prepared ground. He explains that he hopes soaking to hide will soften it, and while they wait he will work on the tent's shell. The travelers whisper to each other, stunned, not believing that he has as many as 3 different magical properties and that he can switch between them so quickly, and he smiles, confident in what he is doing. His next move confuses even more. He summons fresh blue slime, shouts and strikes it with crackling lightning magic, and 3 women freeze, completely shocked and embarrassed by this strange spectacle. Kneeling by the bucket, Oda works with the skin of a wild toad, says how magic helps in tanning, and reveals that finishing the process with electricity is a way to properly preserve the material. He does not stop working, drying the skin with fire magic, and looking at the adventurers explains that magic can replace industrial machines, be a burner, a crane, or even a source of electricity. Although magic is not omnipotent, he thoughtfully adds that making frames is a separate craft, and making things in comfortable conditions is always better. When his explanation ended, he proudly exclaimed that everything was ready, threw off the cover, and showed the creation a pop-up tent, an otherworldly version. Pleased that it turned out even better than he hoped, he noticed that the 3 adventurers were strangely quiet and nudged them to come closer and look. Breaking the stunned silence, Rosso steps forward, a mixture of admiration and surprise on her face, and she directly asks Oda how many magical attributes he has, while Blanche and Ao watch equally stunned. Her direct question caught him off guard. He only managed to make a hesitant sound of surprise. A strange smile appeared on his face as he tried to comprehend it. Seeing his reaction, Rosso instantly panics and scolds herself for starting to talk. She recalls the frantic use of magic with aqua slime and, bowing deeply in apology, begs Oda not to tell about her inappropriate question, while her companions watch her panicked apologies and Oda looks at her, puzzled. He quickly dispels the tension, assures her that everything is fine. To change the subject, he says that the tent is more important and offers to teach the 3 adventurers how to use it. Accepting his offer, Ao watches intently as Oda skillfully shows how to fold the structure. Bend it, stack the frame in a pile and press down, he says, honestly admitting that practice is needed, then hands the compressed package to Ao and encourages her to try holding it. She takes the bundle and immediately feels how light and small it is, loudly wondering if she could fight with it on her back. And Oda nods, saying that the weight and size are exactly what they expected, and suggests everyone go outside to practice securing it. Rising, Oda stands in the open courtyard and begins the next phase of the demonstration, calmly instructing Ao to unbuckle the strap on the packed tent she is holding. Building, his next command is simple and direct, drop it. Ao looks at him. Startled, not believing her own ears, she doubts if she really heard him correctly. Correct, he encourages the traveler Rosso. Just try. Although she doubts, suspecting trickery, she agrees and throws her a small bundle in the shape of a disc. Forward, the bundle exploded softly in the air with a muffled thump and instantly unfolded into a full-fledged tent. Rosso, Ao, and the Pale One froze, eyes wide open at this impossible sight. Rosso even gasped with excitement, not believing it, and asks, wasn't that some kind of tent magic? Oda, noticeably relieved that his creation worked, calmly corrects, it's not magic. Ao has already entered the new building and silently turns around, looking around in awe. Outside, the voice of Rosso sounds, full of surprise. It's incredible that it instantly turned into a tent. Rosso goes inside after her and exclaims how cool it is here, causing Blanche to suddenly say she's coming in too, while Oda explains that he took the skin of a wild toad covered with aqua slime for rain protection, and Ao excitedly marvels at how well it works. Inside the tent, Rosso responded energetically, understood, and Oda told the group that the only way to notice problems with such equipment is to use it, so he ordered to test it in the report bin. Back, Blanche approaches Odie, closer on her face genuine admiration. She says he is truly amazing and that he might even possess lightning magic that no one else can use, and in the background Io's face froze, silently stunned. Our direct compliment embarrassed him so much that he visibly blushed. Stumbling, he couldn't believe she noticed so much and begged her to keep his unique abilities a secret, while Blanche just smiled and said there was no point in pretending. Her frivolous expression faded, a sharp seriousness suddenly appeared on her face, and her eyes narrowed with unwavering intent. Feeling this intensity, she explains the source of her perception. As a white sorceress, her duties often force her to confront the dead, including wandering ghosts of adventurers who lost their lives. Faces of other travelers exhausted to the bone, who probably perished in brutal expeditions appear before her eyes. Addition, her thoughts do not subside while she watches the coziness in the tent. She feels that this is exactly the thing that can soothe such a weary soul. Roles, returning to Oda, she proclaims him the patron of her group and swears that they will never speak about his unique magic. She calmly assures that in her squad Crimson Camellia there is no one so heartless as to repay kindness with betrayal. When Oda sighed with relief and noted that rumors could cause trouble, Blanche suggests arranging a purge in case of problems, but he quickly says there is no need. Necessary? He looks at them and knows. These young adventurers reminded him how important business is and that he still has much to learn. When Ao cheerfully invites Blanche to enter the tent, Oda agrees. After the first task was successfully completed, everyone settled near the tent. Rosso dozed on Blanche's lap, and Ao nudged the smiling Oda to settle nearby, saying that Crimson Camellia are now partners for a long time, not just clients.